Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Enterprise Applications UX, Challenges and Opportunities. Our guest speakers today are Mr. Amol Bagare, User Experience Architect, Pfizer of India, and Mr. Shrikant Ekbote, Principal Architect, UX, Pfizer of India. Amol is a User Experience Architect working with the User Experience Center of Excellence, team of Pfizer. Amol obtained Master's degree in Design from IIT Delhi and has 8 years of industry experience. He has rich experience of building usable and pleasurable enterprise applications for various enterprise clients. He has expertise in various UX methods which include product conceptualization, experience mapping, personas and scenario design, task flow analysis, low or high fidelity prototype design, UX evaluation and specifications documentation. Amol is passionate about the work he does and believes in the idiom, best application is equal to best user experience. The second speaker, Mr. Shrikant Ekbote, obtained his Masters of Design from IIT Mumbai. He has 15 years of industry experience working as a UX designer in various domains like engineering, telecom, banking and finance. Currently, he is working with Pfizer in India as a principal UX consultant. In his career, Shrikant has traveled extensively and has an experience of working in multiple geographies. In his current role, he drives the company's product management aspects in defining strategic UX roadmaps. He believes in the strategic importance of design as a mean for problem solving and as a medium for driving change. So now, without any further delay, over to you, Mr. Amol.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. The topic of today's webinar is Enterprise Applications User Experience, Challenges and Opportunities. My name is Amol Bagade and I will be presenting this webinar along with the co-speaker Shrikant Ekbote. So let us look at the agenda for today's webinar. First, we will cover the quick overview of user experience and enterprise applications. Then we'll talk about user experience challenges and opportunities associated with enterprise applications. And then we'll look at the specific user experience methods for designing the enterprise applications. And then we'll, at the tail end of this webinar, we'll look at the real-life case study from one of our previous projects. And then we'll have a question and answer session. So I believe majority of the people in the audience have already heard the term user experience. But for the audience who are freshers, who are new joining, who have never heard the term of user experience, let me just quickly give an overview of what is user experience. So user experience, and this is the simplest definition of the user experience. User experience is a term used to describe overall experience and satisfaction a user has while interacting with a product or system. In order to ensure successful user experience, an enterprise application should satisfy following three characteristics as depicted on the visual, which are useful, usable, and desirable. Useful means the user should accomplish the goals. Usable means the user should easily perform the task. And desirable means user should enjoy the experience of working with any application or product. The key things to remember about user experience are user experience is not just making the products look beautiful by doing the cosmetic changes, but user experience is all about making the product or application easy to use, intuitive, error-free, and delightful. And I think this is a good enough overview about the user experience, and during the course of this webinar we are going to talk about various facets of the user experience as we go further. So let's start looking at the key topic of today's webinar is all about enterprise applications. So let's look at what are enterprise applications. So this particular visual looks familiar, isn't it? The enterprise application used by enterprise users in the enterprise environment. And enterprise applications run organizations, governments, businesses, and we all are the users of enterprise applications. So what are enterprise applications? Enterprise applications are the software applications used by enterprise users for performing business-related tasks. And as you can see in the first visual, in a typical enterprise setup, you will have CRM application, you have HR application, you have supply chain, you have finance, communication, environment, asset management. So basically there is hardly any facet or function or department is left where enterprise application has not penetrated to. And we all are users of the enterprise application. So since we are users of the enterprise application, who are providing the enterprise application? So obviously our company provides us the enterprise application. So from where our company gets the enterprise application? So typically enterprise applications are developed by vendors, and Pfizer is one of the vendors. There are other vendors like SAP, Oracle, IBM, and these companies design the enterprise applications. We sell those applications to the enterprises, large organizations, and then enterprise make them to the users. So it is a B2B relation, and in this webinar, we are focusing more about vendors' perspective of the enterprise application. And these are some of the examples of enterprise application. And enterprise application did not be only restricted to billing, trading, or cash management. The leave and attendance management system that you use in the daily life is an enterprise application. The reimbursement system or the finance system in your company is an enterprise application. With March is around and December is already started, the performance management system that you use for appraisal is an enterprise application. So let's drill down a little bit more to understand what makes enterprise applications an enterprise application. So the first aspect that, or first characteristic that come to mind is that enterprise applications are typically designed to interface or integrate with other applications. So very rarely you will find the instances where an enterprise application works in isolation. Enterprise applications always work in an ecosystem. For example, any billing application talks with various other systems to capture market data, transaction volume, customer information, pending payments, etc. So this is one of the characteristics of the enterprise application, that it works in an ecosystem. Another characteristic of enterprise application is that it provides complex functionalities and workflows. And enterprise applications are perceived as complex, and they are complex not because they want to be complex, but they are complex because they solve complex business problems, or the domain in which they operate itself is complex. So they end up having various modules, functionalities covering various business processes. For example, a billing analytic tool which deals with big data and the patterns associated with it itself is a complex functionality. Or if we already talked about billing systems, so in a typical billing system there are hundreds of fee patterns, there are hundreds of customers, there are thousands of transactions, and the fee pattern varies per customer, per transaction. There are discount rules. So somebody has to formulate those rules, somebody has to execute them. So enterprise applications by default has complex functionalities and workflows. Then the specific knowledge required to use the application, and I think it is pretty obvious. Enterprise applications solve complex business processes. So enterprise applications are used by enterprise users to do well-defined tasks, and majority of the times they are well-trained or they have academic background in the similar domain. For example, trading platforms are used by trading professionals or finance professionals, and those professionals are trained how to move from point A to point B to point C to point D to accomplish their daily tasks. Another rather very important characteristic of enterprise applications is that they are investment intensive, they are costly in a simple language. So organizations invest huge amount of money to purchase them, to develop them, and to implement them. And since they are costly to implement, upgrading them itself is a costly affair. So since organizations invest so much, the return on investment is the key consideration in the mind of any organization, and user experience can play significant role in helping the organization maximize the return on investment. And when we talk about the UX methods and some of the opportunities, that time this point will be very clear that how return on investment will be improved using the UX for the enterprise application. So now let's move on. Since we have established now what are enterprise applications, let us move on to what are the challenges faced by the enterprise application. And all these challenges will have some of the UX opportunities inbuilt in them. So let's look at first challenge, and it is the buyers of the enterprise applications are not the users, and I think it is obvious. So there is a complex decision-making process for buying the enterprise applications, and majority of the times technology dominates the UX in buying process, and there are various other factors that the decision makers look at. Apart from user experience, they look at the cost, they look at preferred vendor, they look at technology, the fit of that particular enterprise application into their environment. And most of the times, the decision is governed by the analysis, and the buying pattern for enterprise applications is in stark difference to the buying pattern of the consumer application or consumer products. For example, if you are buying any piece of software for your own use, or you are buying any particular product for your own use, say car, there you not only make the decision only on your analysis, but you actually download 30-day free trial, or you go to the dealership and you take a test drive. So basically what you are doing there, before you purchase anything, you test it out. However, in the enterprise world, this practice is not always followed, and what happens is that once the decision maker makes the decision to purchase a piece of software, they expect the users to learn the new system, integrate it into the existing work processes, and become proficient enough to allow the organization to realize the system's full benefit. And what happens is this leads to poor adoption of the application, and it takes longer learning time. We all have first-hand experience of this. When company rolls out a new enterprise application, and when it becomes mandatory, and when we do not able to figure out how to do our tasks, we say, okay, older system was better than this newer system, and that is what I am referring to poor adoption of the application. So it is a huge UX opportunity to improve the enterprise application for a better adaptability. Another challenge is the degree of customization, or varying degree of customization. Very rarely enterprise applications are implemented out of the box as is. It doesn't really matter on the size of enterprise which are buying the application, but each implementation is unique for the client. And the reasons for customization are that the business processes varies per client, user roles vary per client. In small organization, a single user performs all the tasks available or enabled by the enterprise application. Whereas if you look at some large financial organizations, they have specific users doing a specific task. So the user roles vary, and that is why scalability and flexibility of the enterprise application becomes a key concern. And if your enterprise application does not build for scalability and flexibility, it is going to result into poor implementation of the application. Another challenge is organic growth of the application, and it is a natural thing or natural tendency. All the applications grow organically. New features gets added to the application or base product all the time. Majority of the times these new features or products gets implemented or integrated into the application because of customer push. Some or the other customer ask for it, and they are get built into the existing application. And many times this newly added feature usually do not get integrated well in the information architecture of the application, and it results into broken information architecture of the application. So one of the example I can cite from my previous experience is that one of the project when I was doing, the dashboard functionality was integrated inside the reporting module, and instantly I've said that it is wrong, or anybody can feel that, because dashboards are traditionally, or rather the most appropriate place for the dashboard is the first landing page when you get into the application. But when during the data gathering phase, when I investigated, what I found out was that the best product out of the box never really built with the feature of dashboard, and the dashboard was implemented because some of the other customer asked for it. And since the information architecture of the application was not scalable enough to integrate the dashboard as a primary navigation item, the developers put it into the reporting functionality, which they feel is second most obvious choice. And this is a bad user experience. So that is the example of broken information architecture. Another challenge any typical enterprise application faces is that poor integration of the acquired product. So companies or vendors like Pfizer acquire new products to improve their product line offerings. And majority of the times, these newly acquired products are designed by different organizations with different values, different principles, and or for the different customers or a market segment at all. For example, a US-based vendor acquiring a New Zealand-based enterprise application product. So geographical difference, the market they serve entirely different. And when the vendors acquire those companies, they usually hasten the process of integrating the new product into their existing parallel products or into their existing product suite. And the reason why they are in a hurry, because they want to reach the market faster. Yes, we have this added new functionality, but what happens is that because of this faster process, it results into poor integration of the acquired product. And when at the tail end of this webinar, we are going to see a real life case study where in the past how we done with this particular challenge, that integrating the acquired products. There is one more challenge, which is like lack of system perspective. So as we already talked about, enterprise applications are very rarely operate in isolation, but interestingly, they get built in isolation. So when you build the application, you build it as a single out application, and when you throw that into the ecosystem of other applications, each and every application works in a different way. So for example, it could be as simple as that a button in one application is labeled as delete, in second application is labeled as scratch, in third application labeled as erase. Though they all do the same thing, the user has to learn that they all do same thing. Or one application, you think about making the autosave feature, so you enter any input and it automatically saves. And the second application, you have to fill in the information and click on the save button explicitly. And just imagine a typical user has to use these two applications simultaneously, how much frustration it can create. So that is what the inconsistency in the interaction is all about. So we need to have, this is a US opportunity to keep in mind that enterprise applications always build and work in the ecosystem. And there are other factors which are beyond the scope of user interface design or user experience design. As we already talked during the user experience definition, user experience is not just about the UI or user interface design. It doesn't really matter how good your UI look, but because of poor implementation or because of poor infrastructure, if the application is extremely slow or if the system crashes frequently, then it is going to result into poor user experience. For example, you hit on save button and it takes 20 minutes to save that particular form, it is poor experience. So you just can't have a single winning application in an ecosystem. Either all of them are a winner or all of them are loser. So what are the impacts these challenges bring in? I think those impacts are pretty obvious. Poor adoption of the application, reduced employee productivity, high number of support requests to various departments, longer trading hours per employee, which accumulates to significant expenses for the enterprise. So let us look at the new emerging trends in the enterprise applications domain and what new user experience opportunities emerge out of them. So enterprise applications evolved from the mainframe era in 1960s, and from mainframe they moved to minis, and from minis they moved to PC. All these eras are nowadays labeled as systems of record. So instead of keeping physical record in the file in your drawer, you used to keep digital record. And instead of opening the drawer and pulling out the file, you used to go to the system and just ask for the record, and it will just provide you the record. But now, when the internet becomes the mainstream in new millennium from 2001, the enterprise application evolved into systems of engagement, and today widespread acceptance is that enterprise applications are in the social and cloud era. And in this particular table talks about what really we mean by systems of engagement and the comparison with the systems of record. So the focus is more in the systems of record. The focus was more on the transactions, whereas in the systems of engagement, the focus is more on the interaction, bilateral communication. Then, as far as governance goes, in the systems of record, primarily it was for command and control. Now, systems of engagement, it is collaboration, and you can read other features on the slide. But the point here, which I want to highlight, is if you consider the usability focus in the systems of record, there was expectation that user is trained, whereas in the systems of engagement, the focus is shifted to user nodes, basically looking at the exposure user has outside the enterprise environment and bringing those interactions into the enterprise application, and that we are referring to consumerization of the enterprise application, picking up the trends in the consumer world and bringing those into the enterprise world. And this is one of the examples of system of engagement in the HR application. So when the green screen is what the mainframe era, that was the system of record, and nowadays Workday, Silk Road, they are actually changing the whole paradigm how the enterprise application looks. And I will recommend the audience to go and check the Workday and Silk Road and how they're shifting the HR applications altogether. And one of the primary reasons why users are adopting these new applications is because of its improved user experience. And then, as we talk about, the enterprise has moved from the mainframe era to social and cloud era. What really enabled them to move into the new era? And these are the triggers, or these are the trends which are simultaneously evolved. One is that millennial workforce, enterprise mobility, and social interactions. Even though I label them separately, they all are interconnected with each other because all of them grew together. So what is millennial workforce? The picture speaks for itself. I mean, millennials are the 18 to 29-year-old audience who are becoming the mainstream workforce nowadays. This is the generation who thrives on MySpace, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you just name it, all the social interaction applications. 90% of them has more than one personal computing device, and 50% of them frequently share the information with the friends, and that frequency can range from 50 times checking the Facebook status to 150 times checking the Facebook status in a single day. And as per Forrester research, 36% of them are already becoming mainstream workforce by 2014. So you have all the reason to care about this millennium workforce. And they exhibit typical characteristic. For example, they are continually connected, they share information frequently, they speak their own language, they are influenced by peer, they are very expressive and digitally creative. And since millennials are grown with the social era and expect the same level of interaction and collaborative environment from the enterprise applications, there is a huge user-driven push for the enterprise application to adopt the social interaction and look at the consumerization. The second trend I would like to highlight over here is that enterprise mobility. And you cannot talk about enterprise mobility without making some reference to cloud technology, because cloud technology is the enabler for the enterprise mobility. This is not a technology webinar, so I won't talk about various characteristics of the cloud technology from the technical perspective, but from the user perspective, what it achieves is that information is available on demand. Using a browser, you can access the information on your desktop, you can access the information on your smartphone. You can share, and the information is shared appropriately to the different devices based on their screen resolution. And the cloud itself is elastic. I mean, you can allocate as much capacity as needed. Today you roll out your enterprise application for 1,000 users, tomorrow you can scale it up to 2,000 users. So elasticity is one of the considerations. And then enterprise mobility enables the enterprise to connect to the people and control assets from any location because the data is on the cloud. And this really enables the user to make real-time or the decision in real time. For example, in any insurance company, their field staff can take the picture of the claim damage and make certain decisions right there when they are on the field. And these are some of the triggers for the enterprise mobility. First is cost saving. We all know these enterprise save on the infrastructure cost, and it is enterprise mobility is obviously cost saving is one of the triggers for enterprise mobility. Since you enable your workforce to make the real-time decision, you obviously increase the productivity. Since millennials are becoming your mainstream workforce, there is a consistent push from the users for the enterprise to move to the enterprise mobility, and of course the competitors are moving or adopting the enterprise mobility, so your enterprise has to move towards enterprise mobility. And these trends bring up these new UX opportunities that design for the millennial workforce, design for the social interaction, which is consumerization, and then design for mobility. And then we will move to the UX design methods, and Srikanth Ekbode, who is the co-speaker, will talk to this part of the webinar. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thanks Amol. Hi everyone, this is Srikanth Ekbode. So I think Amol has briefly touched upon, the various fundamental aspects like what is user experience, what are enterprise applications, what are the challenges typically faced while designing the user experience of an applications, and in the later part he also touched upon, what are the future opportunities for an enterprise user experience design. So when we were thinking of availing these opportunities, let's quickly touch upon what are the design methods that we can adopt while designing the user experience of enterprise products. So as all of us, many of you might already be might already be aware that there's a classical user-centered design method. So UCD in the short form it is known as. So it's like a precursor of that. So in a UCD method, you always have user at the center of design process, and we have like a standard methodology which starts with research, gets into design, validation, and then into development. And these stages are mapped with the software development lifecycle. Let it be, even if it is a waterfall model, there's a mapping of the UCD process with that. Even if it's an agile model, there's a mapping of how the UCD process has to map to the agile model, and a lot of people have done work on that about how those models should work. So this slide typically explains you the overview of the user-centered design process. Now there are deliverables against each of the process in the UCD method. What is important from your enterprise application perspective, that there could be additional methods, like there could be additional data gathering methods, there could be additional design methods. So we know that traditionally there are data gathering methods from a user experience point of view, like you do a contextual inquiry, you do user interviews, you do focus group session, user surveys, and there are so many of them. So in an enterprise space, since we are talking about a B2B scenario, when one enterprise is creating applications or software applications which will be used by another enterprise application. So usually there is a very strong relationship between the vendor enterprise and a buyer enterprise. So usually all the big vendor enterprises have a board of their customers, which are known as customer advisory boards. So these are like selected group of customers. It's a very close group of customers who are ready to give you feedback about anything coming new or the challenges that they are facing. So it's a very close group of users, and what we have observed in Fiserv specifically, as this customer advisory boards for specific products are a very good platform to get early feedback about the product concept. So whenever we have to kind of test our designs before rolling it out to a larger audience, we generally expose the customer advisory boards to their concepts. They take their early binds, and once we have got a clear sense of the direction, the feedback from the customer advisory board, then it's like then we get into a full-fledged product development. So this is a very good platform for getting early feedback on the product concepts or design. Similarly, all the vendor enterprises have a large customer base, and these customer base, they generally organize these customer conferences once or twice in a year, depending on the size of the customer base. So, the way we looked at customer advisory board is a kind of a very close group of selected customers. Client conferences are a very good platform to meet to a very large group of people. So it's like let's say in United States, you have like a customer meeting of all the your customers across the US now, and there are people from different profiles. So one of the challenges that we discussed previously is that it's very difficult to since buyers are not the users, it's difficult to get end users feedback, and usually what we get is a buyer's feedback. But customer conferences are the places where there's a good chance that you can meet the buyers and the users as well. And this is a very good platform to collect feedback from a large group. Another very powerful data gathering method beyond the traditional data gathering methods I would like to mention here is a usage analytics data. Now, usage analytics is, as we all know, it's like there is an analytics engine fitted to the application. It gives you a data about what's actually happening at the users end, what is the navigation part of the users, which screen users are landing, what are the tasks that they're performing maximum, what are the pages that they are not reaching at all, which they're supposed to. So this, in a sense, gives you provide insights into the latest trends and user preferences. Now this is a very crucial data, because many times we as a vendor organization, we generally land up talking to a decision maker, the buyer of the application, and not to the end users. And at times the buyer may or may not have a complete understanding of what are the user preferences are. So in that case, usage analytics data plays a very important role of giving you the crucial data, and another important thing is it creates a shared understanding of the user's experience between a vendor organization and a buyer organization. So if you already have a product, then based on the analysis of the usage data, you can definitely highlight to the decision makers about what is happening in the app, what is happening to the actual end user. So you can analyze those data, and it's like a statistical data that you can present to the CIO of the company about the current application usage. And what are the showstoppers? So it's like for the enterprises where their revenue is dependent on the effectiveness by which by the way the users use the applications. For example, customer support executive. Now, when they use up CRM applications, if there are some tasks that they cannot do and that is leading to a longer call handling time, then that we can certainly dig deeper into that data and understand what are the features of the applications those are leading to a longer call handling time. And certainly we can improve on the problem which are causing the poorly performing applications. So usage analytics data is another important data gathering method that we can use in enterprise applications. Another factor which is very critical or important from enterprise applications point of view is understanding the customization pattern. Now, those of you who already work in enterprise space and enterprise applications may already be aware that enterprise applications are never sold or never implemented out of box. So usually all of these applications have some base or GA version, what is called as general availability version, which has got some standard features. But most of the time, they are implemented with a very high degree of customization. And the pattern and the nature of customization vary from client to client. Now, there is a huge amount of effort involved in customizing those requirements and building a product as per customization. Now, if as a user experience designer, if we look at the way the customization is happening for various client types, we can set up some sort of relationship between the customer type, the type of user roles, the user roles that organization might have, the kind of tasks that those are the users might perform. Because the typical problem that is faced for enterprise application is if the potential customer is a small enterprise, probably there's a single user who might need to perform various roles, like from CEO to the lowest possible level. And if it is a very big organization buying your enterprise application, there could be like a very watertight compartment among various roles, and user need to complete first task, and then in the process it is given to the next set of users, and the next so on and so forth. So if we analyze those patterns, then it gives you a very good understanding about what are the logical building blocks of the application. Like in information architecture, when we do, we are coming out with a logical way of grouping the application functionalities. So similarly, if we look at the pattern of customization, it gives you a very good understanding of what are the logical or the smallest component of the application, or the building blocks of the application that we need to design. And the way it helps is, the next time there is a customization requirement, you can quickly assemble those blocks without investing much of a time and effort. And even if you assemble it in any way, you won't compromise on the user experience. So this is another very powerful method of data gathering by analyzing the customization pattern. Now, since we looked at the different data gathering methods, so let's quickly touch upon some of the design approaches. So, in design phase, in user experience design, we kind of start with our information architecture, do a conceptual layout. We do a detailed wireframes, and there are various fidelities of the prototype. Like medium fidelity, interactive prototype, and high fidelity prototypes, and so on and so forth. So there are certain approaches that we can take, which are very specific from an enterprise perspective. So as Amol mentioned earlier, like designing for the users is the key thing. So keeping in mind the millennials, their attitude, their exposure to the outer world, and basically making provision for a collaborative workspace. Because enterprises applications are going to, the trend clearly shows that there will be more and more social interaction. There is more and more collaboration that is going to happen in the enterprise applications. Second, another important aspect, design approach, is making the information digestible. Now, enterprise users typically has to deal with a very large volume of data. Now, if we take an example of, let's say, online bill payment, let's say for a telecom company, as a consumer user, you're just paying your own bill, right? There's an amount to be bill to be paid, and you go online, submit the amount, choose the method, and pay the bills. Now, when it reaches to an enterprise where somebody needs to analyze that data, probably he's looking at 1,000 such records and a few thousand such customers. So usually, one of the important aspects of enterprise applications is that the users have to deal with large amount of data. Now, one of the the drawbacks that we have seen in design of these applications is usually there is a tendency to show all possible data that is available to the users, and it is left to the users to choose the or to make decision based on this data. Now, one of the effective approaches that we have seen is if we use data visualization very effectively, that eases up the decision-making process very effectively, because the enterprise user is not looking at the data for the sake of it, but he or she needs to take some decisions based on that data. So if we use a simple data visualization technique, let's say for example, the user's task is to identify a few outliers from the set of data. Now, just a simple technique like highlighting it with the different colors, which has some built-in rules to highlight the outliers. So user can quickly go to those fields and identify those outliers and act on those. Taking this thread forward, there are very powerful data visualization techniques that we can use while we are designing, which helps user make a better decision and faster decisions. So this is another good approach that we have found for enterprise applications. We've talked about a design for simplicity earlier, so it's like a essence of everything. So since the tasks are complex, the design need not be complex. That's the essence of it. So this, as some of you might be aware, there's this concept of stacked in time. So I talked about making all information to the surface at one go, and then letting user choose whatever is the relevant information, rather than overwhelming the user with abandoned information. If we kind of take a conscious judgment in terms of what is the user requirement at that point in time, why that particular user is looking at that particular screen, what decision he or she is supposed to take, and display only the relevant information up front, and then let user explore, dig into the details of details if there's a need, if the need be. So stacked in time is another very powerful design approach that we can take for the enterprise applications. Now we're talking about enterprise mobility, we're talking about cloud computing. So there's an increasing trend that there's a legacy application which is desktop based. Then it needs to be migrated on iPad, and then it needs to be migrated on a smartphone. So this is a very good opportunity, or while we're designing, we need to kind of divide the functionalities which are suitable for that particular device. For example, Amol gave an example of insurance claims. So let's say, for example, taking photograph and uploading it quickly to the application from the site. Now this activity can easily be uploaded or offered on a mobile, whereas simple things like reporting can be done on a tablet, where are more robust functionalities like claim processing, which needs to be happening on the workstation in the office, can be done through the office. So exploring or leveraging the device capability is one very powerful design approach we can take. Then I think we already talked about customization pattern. So designing for modularity is another very powerful technique, I would say. So once we look at the building blocks of the application, we can help achieve flexibility and scalability without compromising the consistency. So as we know, modularity brings in, gives us the flexibility to arrange the blocks the way we want. So from an enterprise perspective, if, let's look at some common things like searching something, editing something, and saving it. If this is one common module or building block, then we can we can call it like an UX object. So I'm going to give you an example later on about how we can bring about this object-oriented stuff in user experience design. So there's nothing but designing for modularity. So this is another effective approach for enterprise applications. And certainly UI standards. So as we all know, UI standards help achieve consistency across the application. Important aspect, more from a software development perspective, is the non-critical UI decisions can be taken by the development teams without involving the UX team. So many other times, it's not possible to involve the UX team, and there are few decisions which needs to be taken during development. So if we have like a documented standard at different levels, like a page level or a component level, the decisions can be taken by anybody in the team. And another advantage that UI standards help achieve the branding identity. So just by looking at the application, that this is the application that I'm aware of, and there's a very the learning curve is reduced to a great extent when we have a consistency. So UI standards is one very powerful approach of achieving consistency. Now, if we follow all this process and if we do, follow these design methods, certainly the benefits that we get is, there's an increased adoption, user adoption. Obviously, there's an increase in productivity, which is very critical from an enterprise application perspective. There's a decrease in the training and support cost. Obviously, there's a decrease in development and maintenance cost. And as a result of it, there's an overall improved ROI for the business, which is very critical, which is from an enterprise application perspective. Now with this, let's move to a short case study. This is a project that we have done in the past at Pfizer. So I'll quickly give you a background of this project. So the project this we are doing is for one of the business units which deals with products in investment services or wealth management, it is called. So typically, in layman term, they are typically for financial tradings and financial planning and all that stuff. Now this was Pfizer's legacy product, which evolved from a mainframe blue screen application to the web interface, and then moving on to a better, it's like a hosted application. Now, over a period of time, Pfizer acquired a few other companies in the ecosystem, and the core product needed to be integrated with that core system. Now, the business vision that time was to sell this product as an integrated suite, where each application would be used by the financial advisor as a part of their day-to-day job. So it was like the requirement was that the user would use a part of a slice of every application as a part of their day-to-day life, and then if the need be, they can dive deeper in one of the applications. And they would also need to make these available on the tablet. And as a user experience designer, the challenge was given to us to achieve a seamless user experience while these products are getting integrated from a back-end perspective. So this is a quick overview of what the 4 applications that we were trying to integrate. So as you can see from here, each of the applications had a different navigation. Each of these applications had a different workflow. Each of these applications had different look and feel, a completely different interaction pattern. And the challenge was to integrate all of this together. So how we moved from, overall vision when they started on this project was to achieve an integrated, modular, compelling, and innovative user-friendly application. So that was the overall vision. So how we translated that into a UX strategy is, there are four main blocks of the UX strategy. So we looked at user needs, we looked at business objectives, we had a system thinking. So it's a very important aspect of designing an enterprise application is your ability to look at the ecosystem, your ability to do a system level thinking, as well as go to a micro level where a component level system, component level thinking. And certainly we looked at benchmarks and all that. So once we kind of define this cornerstones of a UX strategy, then it kind of detailed down into UI directions about, how should be the menu structure, how should be the nomenclature, the visual language, the color and typography, how should be the overall error handling of the application and stuff like that. So that's how we kind of moved from an overall vision to the details. Now, as a part of our user studies, we kind of understood a typical day in the life of a user. So the user in this case was a financial advisor. So we looked at what the typical day looks like. So as I mentioned earlier, the part of this would be, part of this has to be on the tablet. So what task he or she would do on a tablet, what task has to be done on the desktop machine. So there was a clear separation of these two. And we also kind of did a user study and come up with a typical persona of a financial advisor. I know this persona is very useful in terms of guiding the design decisions later in the design stage. So after we kind of looked at the users and the typical day in their life, we kind of looked at the end-to-end workflow. So this was a very complex task where we had to kind of analyze the complex business processes of multiple applications. So there are different reporting modules, there are certain proposals modules, there are different products. So there are 4 or 5 products where we need to kind of look at, and then look at the relevant sections of the business processes which are relevant from this integration perspective. So this is purely a business process flow understanding. Now I mentioned about this UX objects in the beginning. So like the modular patterns of that, So after we went through a business processes, what we did is, identify a few high-level UX objects. For example, some of these are mentioned here. For example, entity like reports. Now, what is the user doing with reports? So there are certain, proposals, like for example, clients and accounts, leads and prospects. And then we kind of analyze what are the user actions associated with those objects. So either user is kind of editing those objects, user wants to know more about those objects, and there are occasions wherein the user is kind of interacting with those objects in a very linear manner. So one task followed by the second in a very wizard manner. And there are occasions where user takes certain actions and the next set of actions are dependent on what the earlier action that is taken. So we kind of understood and detailed out how user is interacting with those UX objects. And based on all this entire analysis, we went to an ideation phase where we got into a joint workshop with business stakeholders, where we did a quick ideation, and then we also did the concept validation with the stakeholders, concept validation with the users, and various scenarios were validated, discussed during the brainstorming sessions, and various design concepts were generated. Now, out of those concepts, then we got general consensus in terms of moving forward with one final design approach. And then we got into a detailed wireframe phase wherein we kind of detailed out each and every screen of the application. And then we got into visual design phase. So here you can see a simple example of how we use the data visualization. So the graph that you see on the right hand side here, the objective was to identify an outlier within the data. Now what we proposed here is, instead of users scanning the whole data and analyzing the whole information in mind, and that is kind of creating a lot of cognitive load for the user. So one of the design proposals was to give a data visualization which quickly highlights the outlier within the data, which helps users to go to that particular record and attend that particular customer. So and then we kind of moved into the prototype development, where a click-through prototype was developed using HTML5, CSS3, and it was shown in the customer conference. So in the earlier presentation, I mentioned customer conference and customer advisory boards as one of the powerful tools of data gathering. So this concept was taken to the customer advisory boards, and we have received a very positive feedback about the overall design direction. And now we are in the process of implementing this design, and it's like it will be production sometime next year. So that kind of describes how we use this methodology that we just talked about in the entire process for designing enterprise application. So with that, we bring to the end of this presentation. So any questions if you have, please go ahead.
Thanks for the insightful presentation. Let's quickly take up the questions now. Please read out the questions and their answers so that all our users may listen to the commendable insights.
Yeah, just one second. Yeah, so the question is, when we are talking about usage analytics data for UX method, is it or will it give us any clarity with desktop applications? Right, so this is the question by Vipina Bihari Sahu. So yes, it will give, so it's depend upon where the analytics is installed. If it is already installed part of your desktop application, yes, it will give you all the data for the application usage analytics. So second question is, yeah.
The second question is, what are the factors that drives a changing in user experience? Example, initially there was no timeline concept in Facebook, and now almost everyone's profile has a timeline. And this was asked by Devarta Patnaik. So the thing is that we already talk about consumerization, but that does not mean that we need to integrate what is all there in the Facebook into enterprise world. But if it is appropriate, then you should make the provision. Otherwise, it is very hard to talk about the specific aspect of it without looking at the key concern there. So yes, you should look at consumerization, but at a discretion.
Right. So next question is from Devabrata Patnaik. The question is this competition centric? As we saw, Rediff, Gmail, Yahoo Mails were providing good user experience, and finally Microsoft upgraded its mail live.com or hotmail.com to outlook.com, while all of the latest UX, swift navigation, easy mail, and customization of mails. So yes, it is competition centric. What you said is perfectly right, and one of the factors that we discussed initially is a continuous push from the market to improve the user experience. So there are like front runner companies who invest very heavily into user research and very heavily in terms of user experience design, and then they are kind of typically are released in the they're released in the consumer products, and then the enterprise products have to adapt to it. So this is exactly the point where we're talking about the millennial generations and their attitude. So if you're a Gmail user, if you're using this other mail which is providing you very good experience, and if Outlook is not providing that, then naturally there's a continuous pressure on Outlook to improve. So what you're saying is right. This has led to the competition, has led to the improved user experience.
The next question is about what about heuristic evaluation, and when this process takes place in the entire flow. Now, Srikanth has already talked about standard UCD methods are not going away. they are going to stay. And where do we do the heuristic evaluation? If we are evaluating it to gather some data, so obviously it is part of research or at the very initial phase. So it stays there. Whether it doesn't really matter whether you are designing enterprise application or simple website. The heuristic evaluation always happens in the phase 1. We call it research, some call it data gathering.
Right. So another question is from Ganesh Manohar. The question is, which UX factors attract the user to frequently visit? Now, I believe this the question refers to more from a consumer word. So because since we are talking about a frequency of visit, I think it is more from like a website or any of the other web applications which are available in the consumer world. So there are so many factors. I mean, basic, it has to be usable, as we said, it has to be useful, it has to be usable, and it has to be delightful. It has to, so unless all three are there, and then naturally once your first hand experience of interacting with that application is good, that's exactly how you create a brand loyalty, that then you tend to visit it again and again. So it's like, unless you have a good user experience for that particular application, the overall UX is something that would attract the user to the frequently visit the site. Okay. I think that's all the questions we had. So if you have any further queries, feel free to write to us. So Amol, you can reach Amol at amol.bagari@fiserv.com. You can reach me at shrikant.igbote@fiserv.com. So with that, we come to the close of this webinar, and thank you very much for attending.
Mr. Shrikant?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one more question that I've already assigned to you. Shall I read it out?
Okay, the last one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just got it. Okay. So how we can develop and update UI UX ability when there are many types of app? Okay, I think it's by Arun Malviya. So Arun, if you can provide some more clarity on this question, that will be helpful, because I think it's too generic, and if you can provide certain specifics around that, that will be helpful to answer. Okay, another question is from Madhavi Bachchu. Where can we get more information about user experience? Any reference URL, etc.? Okay, so this is again a very broad question, but I will try and answer this. So there are various books I would suggest. There are various online reports. So if there are various companies. So if you online magazines, I can recommend you is uxmatter.org. So this is one very good place where you can get about very good information. There is another site called UX Magazine, which extensively talks about user experience. There is another site called Johnny Holland. So they have various videos and magazines and articles have been published, and obviously, if you are further interested, you can visit the site of Interaction Designs Association of America, which is called IXDA. So you can if you visit ixda.org, they have a very good resources section there, where they document all the videos of their interaction design conferences, and depending upon your level of expertise, the reference material is available.
I think that is all for the question and answer session.
Okay. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we can close this. Yeah. Okay, so should we conclude the webinar?
I'm really thankful to Mr. Amol and Shrikant for conducting this webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all.
Thank you.